Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Squat Cobbler. We're here to talk about exactly what you wanted us to talk about, the song
Squirrel.
Wagon by the Dwarves. This is going to be an entire episode breakdown. I'm just kidding. It's going to be Game of Thrones. I'm Mike, at Official Pagan on everything. Joining me, as always.
Hi, everybody. This is Kelly at KELLYTHUL on Twitter and Instagram. And I'll just say it so you don't have to say it later. This is not a show about
Squirrel.
Wagon of Thrones.
Thanks, Kelly, earning us our explicit tag.
Yeah, you took care of that already. But we should, before we get started, just want to give that spoiler warning. If you're a person that has not watched final season of Game of Thrones, you haven't watched it to the very, very end, the final episode, what we're going to be talking about is the final episode of Game of Thrones tonight. Be forewarned. Basically, since I believe all of Twitter and most of Instagram has spoiled it with people weighing in with their opinions, I think we're probably safe, but always like to give you a heads up to say we are talking in its entirety all the things that occurred in the final episode of Game of Thrones.
Everybody dies.
Not everybody.
Not enough people. I was in a poll to choose who lives and dies, and this is a good spot to say you should definitely like and subscribe to this show.
Yes, this would be an excellent time to say that.
But I was involved in a poll on who lives and who dies, and I figured I was safe choosing everyone dies because I really thought the battles were going to be a little bit more epic than they were and have a little bit higher of a death toll. I'm not counting the unnamed Unsully and Dothraki CGI guys dying in the distance.
And the children of Flea Bottom, because a whole lot of them didn't make it out of this show.
So what were your thoughts, sir? I know you're a book guy, not just a show guy. So what were your thoughts?
A lot of people have been expressing their opinions on what they think, and a lot of people are really angry, think that this entire last season was a waste, and there's even folks that have put a petition out and gotten quite a few signatures to say, we ought to redo this entire season with a new set of writers. Which it's just this kind of petulant attitude we're in these days, I think. I do think we've been very fortunate that there haven't been petitions coming out for different people to do Squat Cobblers. Because think that
we nailed it every time, sir.
Okay, we'll go with that. Sure, I can buy that.
Never has a ball been dropped here.
And funny you should mention that because I will include this in the blog post. There is an excellent, funny YouTube video about the ball being dropped by the writers on Game of Thrones that is just hilarious. It's only about 60 or 90 seconds long, but it's fantastic. So nice tie-in. I'll include that in the blog post.
See, I didn't even know that. That's how good we are at this.
Yeah, it's scary good. Yeah, super impressive. I am a book reader, and it doesn't really matter if you're a book reader because my hunch is Season 8 of Game of Thrones is 6 episodes long. The first 3 episodes are covering the contents of Winds of Winter, which is still yet to come out. And then the last 3 episodes would be Joy of Spring, also yet to come out. So I don't have them as reference. My gut tells me that the major beats, how things wind up at the end and the major impacts to the major characters are all things that are going to happen in the books. But they're going to happen in the books, in my opinion, probably a lot better because I just felt, and many people have said this, that this final season seemed so incredibly rushed. Because I do think, I'd have to go back on the timing on it, but I think within a 25-minute span between episodes 5 and 6, Daenerys flips to being evil and Jon stabs her within 25 minutes. So it's just like boom, boom. So I just really felt they rushed through a lot of it. I don't have a problem with how it turned out. I think if they had had a little more time to explain what's going on with Daenerys, what's going on with Bran, what's going on with Jon, I'd have been more okay with it because I had to infer a lot. But overall, you knew it wouldn't be everybody was going to be happy and skipping down the road. But I was okay how it ended. I just felt they took a lot of shortcuts to get there. What's your reaction?
A lot of shortcuts in storytelling. I definitely thought it was very unevenly paced. I don't necessarily think it was bad. It was just unevenly paced. I felt like with the longer, more gradual episodic approach, while sometimes the seasons were a little bit slow and didn't move fast enough, you at least had a sense of time, which gave you an overall continuity. In this, I didn't feel that. There's meant to be passages of time, large passages of time between a number of the episodes in the season. I don't think a lot of people understood that based on the comments that I'm seeing online. While I got that, I didn't feel that during the show. I knew that that's what it was, but I didn't feel that during the show. I also think there's passages of time within episodes that aren't really clearly addressed. And I think that that's, the sort of rushed aspect of it that you're talking about.
It really would have been better because he just jammed so much in, because it was like, okay, here, let's put a couple more building blocks why Daenerys might be getting a little grumpy. And they just kind of, okay, there's this. But they didn't really even explore some of them enough to kind of, because I'm assuming, so obviously seeing Missandei beheaded, that's not a good moment for her. Having one of her 2 remaining dragons killed, that's not a moment for her. And I know we're mostly talking about the last episode, but I'm going to go back to the previous episode to talk about that for a second. So, Mike, you fly dragons with some regularity, correct?
It's true. I do ride dragons.
Yeah, metaphorically. And it would seem to me dragons are in the air, and you have what might be considered a pretty good field of vision of what's going on. So I always kind of struggled how Dany managed to miss the fleet of ships with large crossbows on them, obviously close enough in range to, with great precision, pick off one of her dragons with 3 consecutive almost headshots.
Yeah, it's incredibly the weaponry throughout this entire series is incredibly inconsistent. They seem to have technology and things when it makes for cool shots, and then not when it does other times, because she returns and attacks that same fleet, beating them single-handedly with 1 dragon, despite going up against the same weapon.
Yeah, but she came out of the sun that time.
Yeah, she was facing the direction of the sun, so none of the weapons worked.
Yeah. And I think somehow the fact that she was flying lower was supposed to, oh, look, they got to re-aim them, but it just, I didn't get it. I really didn't get it.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, I get what they were trying to convey, but again, when you're rushing through it, you don't necessarily get that. Now, where I'll not even totally disagree, but where I'll defend the writing of the show vaguely, I don't think the change of Dany was as rapid as some people are saying that it is. Like, it wasn't just the turn the switch thing. I just think because of poor writing in previous seasons, they didn't put enough emphasis on other things that happened. So I've seen a lot of videos on YouTube where people call back. There's a ton of callbacks in her change to the first couple of seasons, and things that she said or things that she did that directly tie to the final episode of the show and the final 2 episodes of the show. So you can go and find those on YouTube, and you'll see like 20 things that showed that this was going to happen. And it does very clearly tie those together. So it was planned out. This isn't an M. Night Shyamalan thing where they're like, it's a twist because I just made it up and it doesn't make any sense. But there wasn't enough emphasis put on that at the time. They didn't carry those threads through each season. And because this feels rushed, it's the pacing for me that causes the problem. So if that was handled a little bit better, it would have been an amazing character arc, a Breaking Bad-esque character arc, where you go from rooting for the character to sort of turning on them. So, and it could have been awesome. But again, like there is literally, so one of them, I'm not going to, give someone else's video breakdown. This is why I try not to do like research into albums that we're going to review ahead of time, because I don't want to regurgitate what someone else said. But like one of them points out, like there's a scene in season 2, I believe it is, where she literally has a vision of the scene of her walking up to the Iron Throne with the ashes falling around her and everything on fire. So, I mean, they really did lay out that this is where it was always going to go. It's just they don't really follow those plot threads strongly enough, and they kind of just drop things and pick them back up. And this is where the pacing to me is an issue. And maybe it's not just the last season. Maybe if the pacing was more consistent leading up to this, it wouldn't have been like this.
I've seen a lot of that stuff, and I agree that there's some foreshadowing and some things that can say, okay, there's an edge to Dany and all that. But to me, the difference, and even with that vision in the dream, it was the Red Keep that had been decimated, which would have been the seat of power of a foe. And so you could absolutely see why Dany might kind of come down on that hard. What I needed was, you've got all of those moments earlier to kind of shows that she can get pretty aggressive, but it was always against typically someone who was either evil or a clear enemy fighting her. And the process to how she was willing to extend that out to hundreds of completely innocent people, I just would have liked for them to say, okay, here's how she's now able to extend her willingness to do that to a group of people that she really doesn't have a beef with. And that, I think, comes into the pacing and the rushing of the last episode, that you you weren't given any time to start to see how things might be progressing that way beyond a couple seconds of her sitting on the wall getting a mad face.
I like that. So yeah, and that's to me that's always been the problem with Game of Thrones, and I think that it's that's been my biggest complaint about the show is the pacing of the show, and I think that this season falls the biggest victim to that because again there's been a lot of foreshadowing to this, and I don't think, and this is just my perspective on it. So for anybody, all the fanboys out there who disagree with me, that's perfectly fine. This is just my interpretation of it. I don't think Dany went evil. I don't think the Daenerys character is evil. I don't think she turned evil. I don't think that's the point of it. To me, the point of it is to the dictator, they're doing the right thing. From her perspective, those aren't innocent people. And I think that it was forcing the characters around her out of their comfort zone enough to realize and see it from someone else's perspective that yes, to them she's the liberator and going through, but every city that she's going to, she's killing thousands of people. To those people, she's the villain.
Yeah.
So to me, it wasn't. It's about the shift in perspective of the people around her. There is no shift in her character, in my opinion. Like her arc is that she doesn't have an arc. She gets tougher as it goes on, but her perspective doesn't change. To her, those are the enemy. She's just killing the enemies like she's done in every city that they've gone to. She's killed thousands of people. To all of those people, she's the tyrant. She's the dictator. So it's just changing the perspective of the people around her.
I would say I have like lots of quibbles and they're minor things.
But all of my quibbles about we'll get to later. All of my quibbles about the last episode are about Grey Worm.
Okay, so we're going to explore that. I'll try it out my main quibbles, and then you can get yours out. I'm confused on Jon's final dispensation. He's sent to to take the black. They seem to have magically been able to reform and organize in a very short period of time, and to guard against what, I'm unclear at this point in time. And then he heads out with the wildlings, and it's unclear in kind of Black Brother garb, but not clear if he's going to live, because it'd be a decent ending for Jon to just live out his life with the wildlings. But I'm not clear if he's just an escort or what's going on there. So that was a little weird to me. But my biggest quibble remains Dothraki count management. And so we start off with tons and tons of Dothraki. There's the Battle of Winterfell. They all have their own little glow stick as they charge into the army of the dead. All of the torches go out, which was an amazing scene. And about 4 people ride back, one of them being Jorah, a non-Dothraki. And then all of a sudden, the next episode, they're like, oh, half of us are left. And then for the final episode, it looked like they were back to full strength again. So I just really couldn't keep the track. And so now they go from a huge number to 4, back to half, back to a huge number. And then, unless I missed it, there was no explanation of the Unsullied were still cruising around King's Landing after this undisclosed amount of time jump, but the Dothraki are nowhere to be seen. And those aren't people you want to kind of let loose. You want to keep close track of the Dothraki. And I don't know, did they go back? If they went back, who took them back? I don't know, but I thought the whole Dothraki population management was poorly handled.
I totally agree with that. We'll unpack it step by step. To me, Jon's ending was he was going off with the free people to live in the wilderness with them. That's how I interpreted it. That was my take on it. His punishment was to go live out his days in the Night's Watch. But really, I mean, who's going to go there and check? They were waiting there for him. They just took off. It's sort of like a certain person whose album we reviewed who was given a weekend pass from prison and didn't come back, escaped.
I could buy that.
Yeah. So that was my interpretation of it. He was sent off for his punishment. Tormund and the guys were waiting for him. They just took off. And he's going to live out his days out in the wilderness where nobody's going to come looking for him anyway.
Okay.
Which to me is what the character wanted. So that's his happy ending. If anything, I think he's the one who got the happy ending.
I think Sansa's probably pretty happy too.
Well, that's true. Yeah. Also, Sansa, and this has been a complaint of mine for the whole season, looks like a Cenobite from the Hellraiser movies now. When did that happen?
During this season, she started to sport that look.
Black leather dresses with chains and sharp-edged blades attached to them. Yeah, she looks like the characters from Hellraiser.
I'd agree. It was a good. I mean, it was a good look for her, but
It
yeah, it
was
was
cool. No, the
puzzling.
costumes are cool, but it's bizarrely to me, bizarrely out of place in this.
Yeah, a fur-free Lady of Winterfell's kind of different, but yeah, she definitely liked the leather here at the end.
I get it. They're making her look, sleeker, meaner. This is, a little weary, a little more focused, world-worn Sansa. I get what they were going with it. This is, the world war built version of her, and I get that. But when she turned into a Cenobite from Hellraiser is where I'm lost.
Yeah, but she'd been the best-looking Cenobite. I think
Listen, my money's on Chatterer. But anyway.
different strokes, I guess.
I totally forgot what your next thing was.
Dothraki
The
Count
Dothraki,
Management.
yeah. So again with the whole continuity, I have a lot of issues that my every problem with the season finale to me or the series finale to me is Grey Worm. It all revolves around him except for the Dothraki thing. So we basically see all the Dothraki die in the one battle, and then there's conflicting versions of how many of them are left throughout the last couple of episodes.
When I watched the scene where it was like Jon Snow came up and took half the Northmen are gone, and Grey Worm came up and half the Unsullied are gone, and then the Dothraki guy comes up and says, "Yeah, half the Dothraki are gone," and I was like, "Wink, right? Like it's half." Dude, you're lying. They're like all gone, but apparently not.
Yeah, I was a little unclear on that, but my real problem is Grey Worm.
So explain yourself.
So I get his character arc, and again, I don't think Grey Worm has changed. You've seen Grey Worm kill lots of people up until this point. It's the perspective of the audience and through the viewpoint of the people around them, the characters that you love changing of them. And now he's pushed to an even more vicious breaking point for watching the love of his life beheaded and thrown off of a castle wall. So, he's going to be a little more on edge than he was before. And again, I don't think any of this is out of character. We've seen Grey Worm kill lots and lots of people, just like we've seen Daenerys kill lots and lots of people. It's the perspective that changes. So I'm fine with all that. I'm okay with that. Here's what I'm not okay with. So John's walking through the street. He finds Grey Worm cutting the throats of prisoners. He confronts him about this. They almost get into a fight about it. He leaves him there. He's still moving along the line, killing people. John goes straight to the stairs to see Daenerys, who's about to speak to the army. Grey Worm is already there. At what point did he run past him, finish killing those people, run through the town past him, get up there, presumably out of breath, take his place to confront him on the steps as he comes up? There's no jump in time there. You follow him continuously through the town, right to the steps, up the steps. Grey Worm's there.
It's little known that there are a lot of escalators in King's Landing. they're well hidden, elevators and escalators, and I don't know. It's a pretty fair point.
So I spoke to my one friend afterwards, and he brought it up first. He's like, "So Grey Worm can teleport? Is that a thing in the show?"
I've liked the Grey Room character all the way until this last episode, and then I just I missed the teleporting skills. I guess that's maybe a plus on his side, but and I understand he's not a happy man because of what happened. I totally get that, but they had won. There was no need. There was no need for all this stuff. Things that they had seemed to fight against in the past, they're now very comfortable in doing. I was never like fully Team Grey Worm, but definitely this last episode, not a fan of him at all.
So I'm going to continue with my Grey Worm problem. So John kills Daenerys. The dragon comes in, burns the throne, which I thought was cool. Takes off with her. Fine. There's nobody in there when that happens. I can think of a whole bunch of different directions that can go that don't involve apparently Jon Snow turning himself in. I get it. The dragon was just there destroying stuff. People are rushing towards that room to see what happened. She's not there. There is blood on the floor. She's not there. He's not dead. I feel like there was other ways to go than his confession because the next time you see Grey Worm, he lays out what happened. He was not there. He was not anywhere near there. So the only way that they know in detail what happened is if John told them. Also, Grey Worm now pushed over the edge. You think he just took John peacefully?
Yeah, since he's all about the slashing right now.
Right.
There's all parts of that I just really struggled with, because if I was Jon Snow and somebody came cruising up after that went down, I'd first of all kick a little ash over the blood, get that kind of covered up, and then go, man, that dragon freaked out. He came up and melted the throne and grabbed Daenerys and just took off. I don't know what he was thinking. But
I think there's 100 different scenarios there because nobody but John knows what happened in that
yeah,
room. And I'm not saying that they're going to believe him, but he went with apparently just confess everything. Grey Worm, who was slitting people's throats in the middle of the street, prisoners who were on their knees, his last shred of hope in the entire universe was just murdered by this guy he already didn't like, puts him in a jail cell, and he seems in no worse for the wear either. Doesn't even apparently beat him up, getting him there. Is like, hey, justice prevails. Put these handcuffs on. You're getting your 3 squares a day, but only in this room.
until I check with somebody else on what we're supposed to do.
Weeks or months from now, it's not clear, but a passage of time.
Yeah, it was. I don't really know what the power structure is at this point in time because Tyrion pieced out and he's in jail. John, who it's not entirely the Stark men are noble men and incredibly dumb men, and so I don't entirely find it unbelievable that John would say, "Well, yeah, I did this because I have to tell the truth," which would be. Because in a previous season, Tyrion said, "Couldn't you just lie a little?" I don't think it's possible for John. But that would have been, if you're going to pick a first time to lie, that's been a great time to lie and just go, "I don't know what went on. It was weird, totally weird."
That was crazy. And I can think of a whole bunch of stories or even other scenarios where that happened. You know, it would have been a really cool ending. My one friend mentioned, what if then they storm in there and he has to fight his way out of the city? That would have been cool. We could have had the last half hour of the show before the wrap up be just him battling his way through the city. I would have been okay with that. Or, what if there's 100 different scenarios? Blame the dragon. Blame the dragon seems like the most obvious one.
So the Blame the Dragon t-shirt will be available on the Squat Cobbler merch site soon.
Blame the dragon. But all right, what if Arya had worn a Daenerys face and just long enough to trick them into thinking everything's fine?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was hoping for. Because I thought when they brought John out after they did kind of that, okay, so the dragon flew away and the screen goes black and now John's coming out of his cell. I really thought, because they were kind of hiding who was up there, I was really hoping Daenerys was going to be up there and we'd all know it was Arya, but no. So
yeah, there's a bunch of ways this could have gone that make more sense.
Yep, but they just wanted to wrap it up. But yeah, and I think probably the of all of that, the bigger thing was Grey Worm going, well, we need to put you in a room, Mister. If you're going to go stab my hero, my leader, the person that freed me, you are totally going in a room with handcuffs,
sir. You are in timeout,
and we will get back to you soon. Maybe hard to tell.
I have slaughtered millions to prove that I've earned this freedom, but I'm going to wait until this council of rich people tells me exactly what to do with you.
And work off the fundamental premise of the other prisoner in so doing. Say, well, seems perfectly fair. It was a whole within a 1 minute time frame. Shut up, you can't talk. To let's hear Tyrion, talk about how the new electoral college is going to work in Westeros.
Yeah, and that's the one thing I was okay with, which a lot of people don't seem to be. I didn't mind that the ending is meant to be the spark of democracy there.
Ish.
Well, yeah.
Because Sam made a big push for pure democracy, and they weren't quite ready for that yet.
To be fair, we don't quite have that, so.
Yeah, that's fair. Wow. Swat Cobbler's getting political.
We're telling you who should have ran Westeros.
So, and that might be a good way to wrap this up. So, we're at the end. We're buying in. You're the Lord of
Squirrel.
Wagingos or whatever. You're up there on the stand, and Tyrion says, "Well, who should we pick of the available candidates, or people who are alive that you could pick through? If not Bran, or maybe it is Bran for you. Who would you have picked to assume leadership of Westeros, given who was left alive?
Not Bran.
Okay.
Because the game is, I understand that. I guess ultimately Bran wanted to see this first step towards democracy, and that's why he accepts the position. But if he can see everything in the past and future, then he's known that this is how it's going to end up for a long time. So it's sort of rigged in his favor in that sense. Now, granted, if he's doing it for the greater good, which seems to be the point where he exits himself from that meeting and lets them work it out themselves, then that's fine. If he's just trying to, start democracy, but it does kind of have a smug thing there.
Because he was completely useless. You've got the greatest spy plane in the world with Bran, and wouldn't you have thought it'd have been kind of handy for him to be around to go, hey, Daenerys, there's a bunch of boats that are I see a bunch of boats with big crossbows on them. You might want to keep an eye out and avoided the first problem. And then to be able to say, hey, they're going to give up, do some things. But no, they didn't do any of that. So, is Bran really just saying, yeah, this is going to play out and I'm going to be king? So I'm kind of good with that. Hard to tell.
So one of the things I've said from the very beginning is that Bran is the main character of this show, which I guess I was proven right in a sense. My biggest problem with this season is I feel like we don't get a satisfying wrap up to the Night King. His death was cool, but nobody seems all that interested in why this happened. Like, snow zombies are a thing. They're specifically after Bran. We just lost most of our people protecting this guy. Hey, why?
Yeah, and I was fortunate that I avoided all the leaks and spoilers, so there was a lot of stuff circulating, most of which was quite accurate in terms of what was going to play out. But I think the majority of the versions that were out there included at the end that Jon goes out with the wildlings into the north, and they come across one of those people spirograph things that the White Walkers did, and kind of fall into disarray because, like, oh crap, they're still here, which would have been kind of interesting to do. But yeah, no explanation. He's gone. They're all gone. I don't really know what the Night's Watch job is now because it's like, well, you don't have to worry about White Walkers, and the wildlings seem pretty chill right now, and they fought with you, so I don't get it.
So as a book reader, though, so I intentionally didn't look anything up. So from what I've been reading now, though, you do get a lot more backstory of the Night King in the already published existing books that doesn't exist in the show.
Actually, no, there is no Night King in the books as of they've ended so far. So that's going to be very interesting.
Okay, well then maybe it's just the White Walkers in general, from what I was reading.
Yeah, you do get a little bit more about the White Walkers, and there's actually, I think, some communication that occurs between them that you can't understand. But yeah, you do get, they start to get, no pun intended, fleshed out a little bit more in the books. But the books have stopped where the books have stopped. Feast of Crows and Dances with Dragons are both set simultaneously in the same time frame. One of them, the Crows book, focusing much more on the North and the Wall. The Dances with Dragons, much more about King's Landing and out in Essos and all that type of stuff. But when the books have stopped, Jon has just been killed at the end of Feast for Crows, and so he's dead. Daenerys has yet to meet Tyrion. Beyond us kind of hearing a little bit about the White Walkers, and there's no kind of, I don't think there's a lot of Craster's Keep even in the books. I'd have to go back and look at that, but there's not a lot. But they have been developed more, but it's much different than there's this kind of leader that you can magically take out and wipe everybody else out, which would be handy for the book, but I don't know how he's going to go. So it'll be interesting to see. But that's the power of the books, is that he can take the time in the books to say, let me kind of tell you how Daenerys is progressing here, so you have a very good idea, so you're not entirely shocked by what happens. Let me talk to you more about Bran and kind of what's going on there. But you don't really get any of that in the show.
Yeah. Again, though, I'll defend the Daenerys story. I feel like they pulled the Starship Troopers.
Yeah, I mean, I find it a logical way for this story to go. I just think, as if you're just watching the show and you have seen some things, just how that final switch flipped to kind of go, not only am I okay using my dragon to cause a lot of trouble, I don't really care who I do it to. And that had not been, that complete disinterest in the innocent, in my opinion, had not been ever really kind of sketched out until. But she definitely has no problem taking out anybody she perceives as an enemy. And if in her mind these people are part of the enemy now, then it's super consistent.
And that's the way that I personally took it. It's a Starship Troopers thing, in my opinion.
Well, and she did kill Aaron Rodgers, which makes me happy. So that's a sports reference. Aaron Rodgers, quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. I hate the Green Bay Packers, so glad Aaron Rodgers died. So. He was an extra in the final episode.
There you go. We managed to fit sports into that.
There you go. And I think a dead Aaron Rodgers is no better way to end this podcast, unless you have anything else to add.
I do not, sir.
Well, thanks for listening, folks. And as Mike mentioned, please, if you can take a moment to subscribe to the YouTube channel, hook up with us either on iTunes, or subscribe to the blog or your podcast tool of choice. We'd greatly appreciate it. And thanks for listening.
Thank you, everyone. All right, I'm going to stop the broadcast.